going to change my mind.
I want to change your mind about the playoff system. I know you're all about the 8-team playoff.
Okay.
And I just looking over the last 5 to 6 years.
Good luck changing my mind. Go ahead.
Well,
it's not going to happen.
I want to present an argument that you should think about. So,
okay.
For the last 5 to 6 years, I would argue that the BCS has got it right, with the number 1 and 2 teams.
The BCS.
Well, I'm sorry.
The committee.
The CFP, the committee.
Okay.
I would argue that they've gotten the last. At least some 1 to 2 teams right.
Okay. So one of
the 1, 2.
So Prince, my first counterpoint. My first counterpoint is, how do we know that they got it right if none of the teams that missed had any opportunity to play anybody that made it? There's always I could pick 4.
That's a great point.
I could pick 4 teams. I could pick, let's say, I want Kentucky, Purdue, Iowa State, and Washington State to play in the playoff this year. And one of them's going to win. So there's a winner. And every time I hear this out of people after the national championship game and there's a winner, everybody says, well, that justified their selection because obviously, yes, somebody won the game. But also take into consideration, and I'll let you continue, Prince, is that they have never, if they are so smart at selecting the 4 best teams in the country, if they're so good at that, they have never selected the 1 seed correctly.
You're right.
Never.
Right. That's a point that you're very right about. But what they have done is they have selected the top 2. I believe, right?
I don't know.
Do you agree with that?
Okay. Based on my analysis. Okay, hang on just a second. Based on my analysis, 2018, yes. 2017. 2017, yes. Alabama, Georgia, okay. 2016, Alabama, right. Clemson, yes. 2015, Alabama, Clemson. Well, in 2015, Ohio State was. There's no question. There's no question. I don't, and let me explain this, and I've explained this many times in the past.
For sure. No,
I did not believe that Ohio State should have been in the playoff in 2015. So people out there, don't confuse 2016 and 2015. I'm talking about 2015.
2015 is when Ohio State won it, right?
No, they won it in 2014. In 2015, Ohio State, there is no doubt that they had one of the 4 best teams in the country. I think they had the best team in the country, and certainly one of the 2 best teams in the country, but they didn't make the playoff. And this is before the committee got off of its track of conference champions. So they were set in that, conference champion, boom, so they don't get in. And I agree with that, but then they changed their minds a year or 2 a year later with Ohio State. So 2015, I don't believe the 4 best teams were there. So I don't believe the 2 best teams were there. But certainly Alabama and Clemson were at a high caliber, and that was a legitimate championship game, of course. In 2014, you know what? It could be argued. I'd have to look at the rest of the AP poll in 2014. So this is what I didn't understand about 2014. So we had some huge issues in 2014. So you had Florida State undefeated. So they get in fine, even though they didn't play well all year. And then they got housed by Oregon by 39 points in the Rose Bowl. They were undefeated. Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor all had 1 loss. So you had 5 teams for 3 slots. They all had 1 loss. For some mystical reason that's never been explained to me, Alabama and Oregon were given a free pass into the playoff. They both had a loss, but there was no question that they deserved, quote, in quotes, deserved to be in the playoff. For some reason, there was this argument between Ohio State, Baylor, and TCU. I don't know why the argument didn't include all 5 of them. It's we get into these groupthink narratives and the national media tells us how to think. And it's like, well, Alabama and Oregon, I know they lost a game, but they're in the playoff. We got to have an argument between Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor. Why? So that's the first issue, is that we had a co-championship in the Big 12, and I I clearly stated, now Ohio State justified the selection by winning the national championship, but I clearly stated that Ohio State didn't deserve it any more than either TCU or Baylor. The Big 12 was just too stupid to tell us who their champion was. So they told us they had co-champions, so that automatically eliminated both of them.
Oh, man. I have to say, that is the first amazing rant I've ever heard you go on. That was amazing just to listen to that.
I just went on a rant yesterday. I went on a rant yesterday or the day before. A couple days ago, I went on a rant, and
you're so professional. It's great to hear you go on a rant.
Well, I appreciate that.
Even Paul Feinbaum goes on a rant.
Oh, if you get me fired up about playoffs and stupid comments that people make, I went on a rant the other day. So I fired up a live stream, Prince, the other day, because there were like 5 consecutive just within a 5-minute span, like 5 people made completely idiotic comments. So I was like, I'm firing up a live stream right now, and I just tore him to shreds. And this guy Timba Wolf, who writes in, this is the Mark I like to see. And I'm like, well, it just takes idiotic. And I'm not saying you made idiotic comments. You just pointed me toward the playoff.
No, I hear you.
And I go nuts about the playoff.
I love rants, man. That's passion. When you're passionate about something, you rant about it, you know? If you didn't care, you wouldn't say anything.
So the last thing I'll say before I let you continue, Prince, is that I could take us through every year of the BCS, even the years in which there were 2 undefeated teams. I want to
hear you rant more. Go on. Come on.
I could take us through every year of the BCS. And this is what I tried to do. I started a video.
How about the 01 Hurricanes? Okay. I will say this. Out of all the fan bases I've met online, there's a reason you have a Mark Rogers Miami channel, because I will admit it, Miami fans are the most passionate fan base on YouTube. I mean, bar none.
You know what I think?
Sorry, but bar none.
You know what I think happened, and I don't know how old you are, Prince. Well, we're talking about playing college baseball.
I'm 30 years old. I was born in 88.
Okay. Oh, I'm an old guy. So regardless of how old they think I am, I'm pretty old. So, I'm watching college football starting in like 1978. So when Miami started to win, I'm like, I was steeped in Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Texas, So Miami started to win, and I was annoyed by it, because I'm like, who are these? Even though I was a young kid, I just didn't like a newcomer to the party. I wasn't really into Florida State either. Oh, yeah. Florida State, I'm like, why are they winning? The teams that are supposed to win are supposed to be Notre Dame and Ohio State and Alabama. So anyway, my point being, what I think has happened, you were talking about the rabid fan base at Miami. What I think has happened is they were just so swag and chic and fun for kids growing up from the mid 80s into the early 90s, that regardless of whether you were from Miami or North Dakota, if you just started watching college football and you had no allegiance to your state, then you're going to be a Miami fan because you thought it was cool. And so they've built up a pretty large fan base from that generation.
You just nailed it on the head. Because you know what I've noticed too is a lot of these dead hardcore Miami guys do not live in the state of Florida.
No.
So they're passionate about this. They're passionate about even Dennis Wilson, Alonzo. None of those guys don't even live in Florida. And I think a combination of the cool and especially the turnover chain, I think that brought a lot out. I thought that was genius, what Manny Diaz did. That revolutionized the sport. When you watch Sports Center, it was all about it was all about the turnover chain, I thought that was very cool.
Very, very good. Yeah, definitely. So the first you want me to go on a rant? I'm just going to take 1 year for example.
No, go on a rant, please. I'm just trying to psychoanalyze why so many Miami fans do not live in Florida. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it. I think that's it right there.
It was like a cool factor, isn't it?
Most of them are probably about 30, 35, 40 years old.
Totally agree.
So in 1998, we came up with this remarkable BCS formula, which from right out of the gate, I said, well, this is asinine. This makes no sense because here's the deal. Do you know what sport, and I've said this a number of times, so I'm sure there's people out there rolling their eyes. Do you know what sport would be a perfect fit for the BCS?
None.
Major League Baseball. Well, you're right. None. That's the ultimate correct answer. But if it had to be applied to any sport, it should be applied to Major League Baseball. They play 162 games. If there's any mathematical formula that should get something right, it's like, well, we got 162 games to analyze every freaking team in the league.
No, from a statistical standpoint, you're right, but at the same time, as a baseball player,
no. I am in no way arguing that there shouldn't be a playoff in every sport. Yes, but I'm saying
I agree.
If you have mathematical data based on results on the field that should be valid, it's for that sport.
Right.
Not a sport where they only play 12 games and nobody plays each other, that there's not even a single game between the Pac-12 and the SEC, and we're going to measure this mathematically? Seriously? So what happened in the first year? What happened in the first year is that Tennessee, God bless them, they were the luckiest team in the country, but they skated through undefeated. Now, it took Clint Sterner like rolling the ball right to them on midfield against Arkansas, and it took a crazy pass interference at Syracuse to bail them out. But to their credit, they were undefeated. So they're in. Got it. There's one slot, Tennessee, SEC champion. Boom. They've got their slot. Okay. Who plays Tennessee? Well, let's see. Ohio State, Wisconsin, Florida State, Arizona, and UCLA. 5 teams are all 11-1. So you tell me who's supposed to be playing Tennessee for the national championship? I don't know. Who should be playing them? Well, we should have a playoff. That's what we should have a playoff, not one of them gets selected. And ironically, the BCS system selects the team that had the worst loss to go play in the national championship. Florida State lost to a 6-6 North Carolina State team by 17 points, but they get to go play in the national championship game.
I mean, it's absurd.
And it continued from there.
Because football is all about matchups. I mean, as far as the major leagues goes, I mean, from a statistical standpoint, that makes sense because you play 162 games plus postseason. But then again, it's all about who gets hot at the right time in baseball. You could just be an average team, and if you get hot at the right time, you can win the whole thing. And I mean, I guess it goes from football the same. It's all about getting hot at the right time.
Sure, we've seen that in the NFL where the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Green Bay Packers have been 6 seeds. And
it has to matter.
Absolutely, it has to matter. Absolutely.
So that would be my argument. I know you're for an 8-team playoff. I just personally, I think that a 6-team playoff, all of the conference champions, and then you can wild card the last one, either a group of 5 or if you want to pick a wild card. I mean,
no, Prince. No.
Territory. It's rough territory. But here's my argument. All right, so the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, who everybody thinks is like the greatest team ever.
Sure.
Blah, blah. I mean, do you know who they played in the national championship? Number 4 Nebraska.
Come on.
They playing the number 2 or 3 team.
Come on.
It's a joke.
Come on.
The only team, the highest team they played was number 12 all year. Besides that.
There you go. So what happened in that particular season was that Nebraska lost to Colorado on Thanksgiving weekend 62-36 and didn't even make the conference championship game. And the stupid BCS formula still said that they were the second best team in the country and sent them out to go play and get annihilated by Miami. The final score was 37-14. It could have been 77-14, but Miami just didn't play after the first quarter when it was 28-0 and just decided not to play anymore. That game was an embarrassment, and Nebraska couldn't even make it to their conference championship game, but the stupid BCS formula said they're the second best team, and they didn't even there wasn't even enough intellect involved to correct it. So 2 years later, Oklahoma lost the Big 12 championship game 35-7 to Kansas State, who wasn't, they were a good team, but they weren't elite. Kansas State has never had elite talent. Oklahoma loses by 4 touchdowns, but the stupid BCS formula still determines they're the second best team in the country and sent them to go play LSU and lose in the national championship game.
I mean, how ridiculous is that? Like, there's just no common sense involved. So I would take your 8-system playoff for anything, but I would have to argue a 6 because maybe I'm biased, but like I figure there has to be. I mean, only because of the past 5 years, there's been a clear number 1 and number 2. So I just almost want to bonus them somehow.
Prince, you haven't been listening to me. There hasn't been a clear number 1, number 2.
Well, I guess for the playoffs, you're right. I mean, Bama and Clemson have been spread out. You're okay. All right, you're starting to convince me.
Clemson was the number 1 2 years ago, and they lost by 18 points to Alabama.
They did.
And there certainly wasn't a clear number 1 or number 2 out of the other 2 because Oklahoma took Georgia to overtime.
If we do 18 playoff, are we doing all conference champions?
Before I answer that, let me make one other point just because I like to.
No, definitely. You're a brilliant guy. I love hearing it.
Well, I appreciate it. Prince, do you like any other sport? The NFL, Major League Baseball, whatever?
Well, yeah, definitely. I love Major League Baseball. My stepdad's the hitting coach for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Love it.
Pittsburgh Pirates. All right. Yeah. All right.
I love NFL. I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, unfortunately.
So you're 30 years old. You're a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. There hasn't been a whole lot going on. I used to be, and I still am a huge baseball fan, but I used to just like soak up numbers and watch all the games like crazy, like college football, but I just don't have the time anymore.
Right.
So my point about the 8 teams. So there's a guy that used to come on here all the time, Mike Laval. I've got tremendous respect for him. He used to write for Last Word on College Football. But the one thing that we would just go head to head on was this playoff system because he thought 4 was plenty. It's good. And you can just watch the teams and determine they're the 4 best. So my argument, and there were only about 47 different points to my argument. It wasn't difficult for me to come up with all sorts of cannon fire, but this was one of them. Okay, I'm not wanting college football to be like a professional sport in any way, but in the NFL, nobody complains about the playoff system in the NFL, and you've got 32 teams and you've got 12 make the playoffs. That's like 35 to 40% of the league makes the playoffs. Okay. You've got the same situation in Major League Baseball with 30 teams and 10 make the playoffs. That's a third of the entire league, 33%. In the NBA, it's ridiculous. 16 out of 32, 50% of the league. Okay. In college football, just expanding it to 8 teams out of 130 FBS teams, that's still only 6%. That is still the very cream of the crop would make the playoff. We are not watering it down with 8 teams out of 130. The very top 6% make the playoff.
And I mean, so to add to that argument that you say, I mean, look at March Madness. March Madness is one of the greatest sporting events ever.
Absolutely.
Like what?
And I don't want to water it down with the 64th best team in the country. And the other point that's been thrown at me is that, well, we don't want the 8th best team in the country winning the college football playoff because they didn't deserve it based on their regular season. They're the 8th best team in the country. Well, first of all, we make a judgment with our stupid polls, me included, my top 25 poll, that, oh, they're the 8th best team in the country. Well, who said that they're the 8th best team in the country? We said that they're the 8th best team in the country. But if they get into the playoff and they beat 3 of the 7 best teams in the country in consecutive weeks, you talk about earning a championship. Oh my, they're going to be 8-1. They just beat the number 1 team in the country. Then the next week they'd have to play the 2 seed and beat them. Then they'd have to play like a 4 or 5. They just beat 3 of the 7 best teams in the country in a row, and they didn't deserve to get. And this is after they had like an 11-2 regular. The number 8 team in the country is not going 8-4. They're at least a 10-2, 11-2 team. So they will have well deserved to win the national championship.
Conference playoff, or would you do a committee? I mean, well, obviously I have to do a committee for the last 2 spots, but would you do the conference champions automatically get in? Because I think that would boost if anything, that would boost the regular season, right?
Absolutely. This is another farce of an argument, Prince, is that people say that would devalue the regular season. I reverse the argument to say, what devalues the regular season is back when the BCS days where we only had 2 teams make it, and we see teams losing conference championship games that still make the final 2 that I just noted, 2 of them. And number 2, basically, we're looking at 2 games the final weekend that mean anything. The rest of the games are completely meaningless toward getting the final 2 spots. And the same thing holds true with this playoff, where we had about 3 games that meant anything at the final weekend of the season last year. So we could do it one of 2 ways. And I often say it this way because you can either include the group of 5 or say, you know what, group of 5, you're a different brand of football. Go play your own championship. And I would have no issue with either one of them.
Right. As a Clemson fan, we've a lot of Clemson fans, I'm sure, will disagree with me or you right now. But what I'm saying is there's going to be a time when Clemson doesn't, we don't win our conference. Maybe hell, we've messed up a game with Pittsburgh and Syracuse, but maybe we're the best team in the country and we messed that up.
Sure.
So maybe we do want to get in on that 7 or 8 seed and we have a chance to prove ourselves. So, all right. So you changed my mind. You changed my mind from 6 to 8. I agree with you.
So think about this. I appreciate that, Prince. As a big Clemson fan, think of this. Consider this. What year did you win your first modern, more recent national championship? Of course, 2016. Okay.
Yeah, 2016.
Where you lost to the Pitt Panthers, as you mentioned, 43-42. Remember that game? James Conner had a big game, 43-42 at Clemson. Think about this. What other game did you win that you won the game not based on a play that Clemson made, but on a goof from the other team that would have eliminated you from the playoff? If North Carolina State could have made a 35-yard field goal, which is not difficult, right. You guys had nothing to do with that. They just missed the field goal. You don't make the playoff.
All right, you just blew my mind. Okay, you just changed my mind. I completely agree with you. I think 8. What do you do the 5 conference champions because they deserve it, and then do 3? I think a committee of 3 to do the last 3 would be good.
Yes.
There are people say just automatically give group of 5, a chance. No, I kind of don't agree with that because there's times when UCF and all those teams are down. So I think a committee doing the last 3 would be perfect.
Well, if we're going to expand this out to 8 teams and not give the group of 5 an automatic spot, I really think we need to say this is a Power 5 deal, and you need to go play your own playoff, because if we're going to shut them off even at 8 teams, I just don't think, as I like to say this, and I don't know if you've ever heard me say this is one of my favorite rants as well, that this has been proven through 5 years, and I don't disagree with it, that UCF should not have been in the playoff, even though they did everything that they could do the last 2 years. They didn't make the playoff, and I didn't think that they were one of the 4 best teams by any stretch, but I felt for them because they did everything that they could. So what I believe the College Football Playoff Selection Committee should be tasked to do every August is go to every group of 5 training camp, go to practice for they got to go out to Kent State. They got to go to Appalachian State. They got to go to Central. They got to go see every team. And in the middle of practice, there are two-a-days. They got to gather the team around, and a member of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is going to say, we appreciate your effort. We know that you're spitting blood and throwing up your guts in these two-a-days in 98-degree heat. We appreciate your effort. You could go out and win every game 50-0, and you have no chance in hell of making our playoffs. So good luck. We'll see you. Have a good season.
But then again, yeah, if we make the best group of 5 team, I mean, we could just make them 8 to you, right?
We could.
I mean,
that would be fair.
If we feel like they're down that year, I mean, you have to have a committee to do the last, like, 3. Oh, I guess you'd have to have a committee to do all 5 teams and rank their progress, right?
So I would go with the 5 conference champions. I would have a group of 5 team make it. I believe I would put some kind of stipulation just in case there was some kind of odd year where there was so much parity in the group of 5 that there were like a ton of 9-3 teams. I wouldn't want them in. They would have to reach a certain like 11-1, 12-1 limit with 1 loss. No losses or 1 loss group of 5, something like that. And then, yeah, the other 2 teams would have to be, you would have to have a committee, and I would want metrics and evaluations made that were very stringent on the other teams, certainly. So this past season,
I think that would get the Pac-12 and like teams like that more involved. Like all of a sudden they would care like what team makes the playoff. You know?
Absolutely.
I think that would help college football.
Oh,
yeah, you completely changed my mind right there. So I appreciate that.
So Prince, my because one of the other main callers here, I think it's MCD4 Sports. He calls in all the time, ranting and raving about a 16 playoff. And the issue I have with a 16 playoff is, so in the NFL there are bye weeks. There are teams that earned buys in the NFL playoffs, of course, but that was based on an objective system. So I did this with MCD4 because he calls in and he wants a 16 playoff. And I'm telling him that to have a 16 playoff and to have 2 teams have a bye is such a remarkably huge advantage for those 2 teams. It's not fair. And I've gone through every year and I've said, okay, who are going to be your 2 teams that get buys? And he throws 2 teams out. And then I tear his argument to shreds and let him know why those 2 teams didn't earn a bye any more than like 2 or 3 other teams did. Oh, that would be you talk. Oh my goodness, that's a huge advantage.
Think about that. Yeah, there will be hell to pay, and then too, you're getting the right. It's just like baseball, man. Like some of the bottom seeds end up winning the whole thing. Even in college baseball, you look at the College World Series. A lot of times, 8 seed will go and take the whole thing. So I'm all about the best team winning, and sometimes the best team is not the best team all season. Sometimes it's all about getting hot at the right time, and no, I completely agree with that. So you changed my mind. Yeah, you definitely changed my mind right there.
Well,
I agree with you 100%.
I appreciate it, Prince. And the next time you have time to let me rant, I will explain why, not that Ohio State deserved to be selected in 2015, but that why the bounce of a ball can completely change a season for 2 different teams when you compare Alabama that season and Ohio State. How their resumes were identical, but just because of circumstances, it gave Alabama an entry into the playoff that they didn't have anything to do with. It was a game played in Arkansas, like that they didn't even participate in, versus what Ohio State went through, and why that the bounce of the ball determined the playoff spot.
I appreciate everything you do, Mark Rogers. Love your channel. I try to promote it as much as I can, man. I get as many people, as many friends. I got my Michigan friend following you now, so I try to do as much as I can. I appreciate everything you do, man. Trust me, everything you do is not going unnoticed.
Thank you, Prince. So
we'll see you on ESPN soon.
If they've got enough money to throw at me, I guess.
Oh, they will.
I'm just kidding. Thank you so much, Prince. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank
All
you
right,
so
take
much.
it easy, buddy.
Bye-bye.